Hello monsters and welcome! No need to keep you guys waiting. Tonight we have 5 no-sleep stories from Reddit to share with you. So monsters, hold on to your teddy and let the stories begin. I Remember by Palemouth. I remember. Oh God, I remember. She never told me that I would remember. Or maybe she did. I don't know. It's all a blur. And I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm not sure I'd even believe myself, but here I am. It's happening, and it's real. Oh God, it's real. This is real. I think I feel another panic attack coming on. I'm taking deep breaths when I notice her staring at me from the bedside table. I lock eyes with her. Her face mimics my expressions, every rapid eye movement in perfect flow with mine. I touch my face, she touches hers. I brush my hair behind my ear, and of course she does too, never missing a beat. I can't take this. I'm going insane. I knocked the mirror to the floor. I'm sitting on my bed now, staring at the many pictures framed on the wall. She's smiling in every one, laughing, kissing him, her boyfriend. Every memory floods back as my very own. I was there, wearing the velvet dress on Christmas Eve, posing in the fruity bikini on the white beach of Jamaica, gasping in awe at the ring he presented to me. I was there. It was me. Except it wasn't. Tears fill my eyes. These memories are false. I'm not her. I have memories of my own that are better forgotten, except I remember. How long it happened, I cannot tell. It could be minutes. Or it could be months. I don't know. It's all a blur that merges together like a never-ending dream. The more I look at the photos, the more guilt I feel. She was so beautiful. I pick up the mirror. A crack runs down my otherwise perfect reflection. I see my eyes filling with tears before I feel the wetness sliding down my cheek. She was a nurse. She helped people. She had a dog who died when he was 9, and she cried for days. Her first boyfriend broke her heart into so many pieces, and the only way she could put it back was by sticking the shards together with the messy glue of antidepressants and unbranded vodka. But like anything broken, you could still see the hairline cracks if you looked close enough. Her boyfriend gave her flowers when she seemed sad, but rose petals do nothing for bleeding thighs and wrists. Despite all this, she was pure, kind-hearted. She was so good. She helped people. Her name was Eve. She had blonde hair and brown eyes. She was 23. I'm telling you all this because she doesn't deserve to be forgotten. She was so ordinary. It's not her fault, but please understand that I was desperate. Okay, I promise you I did not know this was the consequence. She didn't explain, or maybe I was just too weak at this point to ask questions. He just wanted to end, but I wasn't ready to die. Now don't get me wrong, it wasn't fair. I wasn't bad. I did not deserve the fate God handed to me, but why did I think I was so entitled to live? Millions around me perished. Good people. Innocent people. And children and the elderly. And they all died. I knew that. I'm not that naive to think this whole operation was on a small scale. So why did I feel so special? Why did I think taking someone else's life was acceptable? I wish I never noticed her. She comes to you when you're at your most vulnerable. When you're on the brink of death, she offers you a lifeline. I didn't question why no one else could see her. Why she was in here when she looked so older than time itself. Or why the guards didn't notice her standing away from the group at roll call. I accepted. I remember, in the middle of perpetually angry men shouting orders in a language I didn't understand, she told me I would be all shiny and new. I wouldn't have to worry about this life, if that's what you want to call it. I would live. As the other rows of women stood being counted in the cold morning air, she didn't tell me I would be taking someone else's life while they take my place in this hell. She did not tell me I would have someone else's memories, living as if I hadn't seen things I have seen. As the rest of my barracks were marched off for an unexpected shower, she did not tell me I would remember. He's home. He's calling out to her with a string of bittersweet pet names, and expects me to walk down the stairs to greet him with sweet nothings of my own. Oh God, I can't. I look down at my swollen stomach. I must be quick. He can't stop me. I promise you'll be reunited soon. Babies need their mothers. You can't play God. You can't change what is destined, and it's time for me to accept my fate. I'm sorry, Eve. I didn't want it to end like this, for me or for you. Maybe I can make it up to you in death. Think about it. You all know at least one person who took their life. Maybe it was someone close or someone on the news. This person was otherwise happy. No reason to want to end it all. More often than not, they had no previous history of depression. Everyone questions why they want to die. I have the answer. They remembered. Static by Leozolu. I'm going to tell everyone about the event of tonight, only because I'm not sure how much longer I have left. My night started out simple, watching shitty Saturday night TV. After a few hours of clarifying that no channels held anything decent to watch, I decided to turn it off and scroll through the many social media apps I have on my phone. It didn't take long for me to fall asleep right there on the sofa, only to be woken up not much later by a cracking noise. I stirred suddenly, taking my surroundings, and noticed the TV had been switched back on. However, the screen showed only static. I looked around for a moment in case I had accidentally sat on it, but my search proved it was still on the table where I left it. And just as I reached to turn the TV off, I heard what sounded like whispering coming from in between the crackling. Curious, I leaned closer to try to make out what was being said, if there was anything being said at all. That's when a black hole type thing started opening up from within the static, as though something was pulling it apart. To my horror, fingers reached through the screen, then the arms, then its shoulders. Then the whole body crawled out. It was around my height, but no discernible features. It looked as though a glitch had fallen out of the television. I stared at it with a shock that rooted my feet to the floor. That was until it began advancing on me. A whisper of electricity hitting my ears and making all the hair on my body stand on end. With each step that this thing was taking, the floor seemed to burn as though lightning had just struck the area. The thing's outstretched hands were pointing towards me. Every now and then it would flicker and jump too much closer towards me. I ran for the door and slammed it shut behind me, and for some stupid reason I thought that it would keep it away. Perhaps I was only dreaming. I let out an audible gasp as this thing seemed to glitch right through the door, whispering unintelligible words at me. I ran as fast as I could from door to door inside my house, hoping that I could at least trick it away from me. And that's how I got to where I am now, barricaded in my basement, wishing with all my might that this isn't real or that it won't find me. I know I should have run for the front door, but the fear had muddled my thoughts. However, a dread has been filling my stomach as I've been writing this. The sound of crackling has filled my ears, and now I remember that the small TV that I have had down here for years, sentenced to the basement after I got a bigger TV set. I can hear the whispers again, only now I can make out what they're saying. It's only one line repeating over and over. Tune in. We're coming for you. I'm Afraid by MezmerJester. Hello. Before I begin, I want to let you know that this will be much different from my other stories, as my other stories were purely for entertainment. I'm in college. I live in a large colonial-styled house in New York. My mom and dad were currently on a tour in Europe and gave me a good amount of money to buy food and such for the month. You could say that my dad has made a lot of money being a surgeon. I go to Hofstra College, and I have the house to myself for about a month. Recently, I've been noticing strange things about my neighbor. He moved out a few weeks ago, but I still see lights go on and off, in a flickering fashion. Just yesterday, I saw his TV turn on and play static. His TV faces my window, which is why I could see it so clearly. Well, if that was the case, I asked him if I could have his toaster oven, since ours was broken, but he immediately declined. He didn't sell the house though, for whatever reason. I even asked him why, but he immediately dropped the subject. Since I see activity over there very often, I've started knocking on his door and trying to visit, but he never answers. And one day, I even tried to sneak in the house. Rather stupid of me. I climbed through the open window in the back of the house. I found no sign of anyone living there. The wallpaper was moldy, and a stank of wet dog and manure. It was so weird. But maybe he comes back at odd hours and doesn't like visitors. But that's not the weirdest thing. The weirdest thing is what I saw last night. I stay up every Friday night playing online with some friends over Skype, usually until around 6 AM. I was so jacked up on Monster energy drinks, destroying my friends in Grand Theft Auto. Then I took my short hourly break to stretch my legs, and I took a look out my window. I saw my neighbor back in his house, in front of his TV. I could hear some operatic song playing from his house, insanely loud. The sound was nothing short of terrifying. The shrill voice, scratching string instruments, the booming percussion. It sounded like someone scratched up a record and put it on a damaged record player. He was naked. He had some strange paint on him. It looked like a red stripe across his body, going up his slender figure and down his neck. His head looked like he had been slashed up, and it was truly terrifying what he did next. He began to dance. Not just any dance that you'd see a white guy try to do. This one was beyond terrifying. His body swayed back and forth as he walked past the window. He snapped his fingers in the air as he continued swaying and waltzing. He looked up at the ceiling and mouthed something. His throat started to convulse, and it looked as if he were wailing into the ceiling. I never, ever thought that I would see him like that. I was worried for him. I thought he needed psychiatric help, but like a moron, I stood there in full view of my massive window, staring at this crazy man. He kept doing his frightening waltz before turning and looking out of his window. I still stood there. His view slowly turned up towards me, and he had a genuinely hurt and angered look on his face. He disappeared from the window for a second, and my heart stopped. I kept looking outside, wondering where he went. He reappeared outside, holding a shard of glass, cutting into his chest. He laughed and laughed and laughed as blood spilled from his wound. He dropped the glass and began sprinting across the street. I froze in pure terror as he jumped underneath our deck leading to the backyard. I haven't seen him since. I don't know what to do. I don't sleep. I'm terrified. I'm afraid to leave the house. I've tried, but every time I open the door, I remember his terrifying run, and I can't walk. I'm afraid. Well, I think he might be inside. She's gone. By PsylentProtagonist. My wife is missing. Wasn't sure what else to do except keep this written account in the hopes that by gathering my thoughts, I might notice something I missed before, and to realize some of the happiness she brought to my life. Until I find her, these memories are all that I have left of her. I work as a paramedic in a semi-large city of 100,000 people. At least it seems large, as we take over 30,000 calls a year. As you can imagine, my job requires me to work odd hours, usually 24-hour shifts. But it does balance out, because I get more days off to spend at home. Not only to spend it with my wife, but to decompress from all the bad things I see. Despite all the toughness and bravado public service workers show, these things do take a toll on you. I've seen death in various forms and ages. In fact, for a while, I was known as the Dark Angel among my co-workers, because I had a 2-month stretch of having a dead person each shift. Not just normal deaths either, but all kinds of messed up ones. Car accidents, suicides. Once, I even had a child who had been burned to death by his parents because they got tired of him screaming. However, all this bad stuff really makes you appreciate family more and the time you spend with them. In my case, it's my wife. We want kids someday, but being a young couple, we just want to spend time together. Besides, my job kinda drives freakiness, and well, it would be hard to have sex with kids running around. My wife, though, is the complete opposite of me. She's gorgeous and very caring. Even though she doesn't understand my job, she always makes sure she's there for me. Some nights, when it gets to be too much, she holds me while I cry. My wife, though, is the complete opposite of me. She's gorgeous and very caring. Even though she doesn't understand my job, she always makes sure she's there for me. Some nights, when it gets to be too much, she holds me while I cry. She works a normal 9-to-5 job at a local pediatrician's office, so unless I get off in the morning, she's home when I get off work. She's a nurse, but never worked any gruesome jobs. She never really had a desire to, and she loves children. But yesterday, something weird happened. I had worked a long, boring shift, nothing but transports from one hospital to another. I hate those shifts, but they're a necessary evil in this job. During a late transport, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I glanced at the patient to make sure they were asleep, then pulled my phone out. We weren't supposed to text in front of the patients. I smiled when I realized the text was from my wife. Since it was close to 1700 hours, which is 5 o'clock for those who might not know, and I was off for the next 2 days, I thought it might be a sexy little love letter. Something along the line of how she would take care of me or surprise me. Maybe some pictures of new lingerie she was going to wear for me. I was disappointed when it was a simple text saying, "Working late." No smiley faces, no flirtatious promises, not even an "I love you." It was unlike her since her text reflected her personality, full of life and always trying to have fun. At the time, I thought that maybe some sort of emergency came up and she would talk to me later. Looking back, I wonder if something was wrong. Should have realized something was up. I should have pressed the issue. After the transport, I went home and fell asleep on the couch, waiting for her. I didn't set the alarm, since I figured she would wake me up when she came home. It was a restless sleep, tossing and turning. Even though my shift had been uneventful, I kept having nightmares and felt like I was being watched. A therapist once said I had the beginnings of PTSD, but I stopped going back to avoid losing my job. Companies still don't understand PTSD and will fire you if you have it. 4 hours later, I woke up, realizing my wife never came home, and worse, there was no text from her explaining where she was. Frantically, I dialed the non-emergency number for 911, and if I asked if any vehicle accidents had come in. A feeling of half relief came over me when they said there hadn't been any all night. I then asked to be transferred to the police line. They were worthless. All the things you see on TV about them having to wait 48 hours is true. Too many past cases of people freaking out and wasting money have made them implement it. I guess I can't blame them. Except, I also know that the longer someone is missing, the less chance they have of being found. Once I got off the phone with the police, I received a text from my wife's phone number. I almost jumped for joy as my fingers pressed the unlock button. Except it wasn't the text I was hoping for. Instead of the explanation on why she was late or a message letting me know she was almost home, there were only 3 words. She's not coming. My heart stopped. At first I thought this might have been a mistake, that she was texting something else, and accidentally sent that part to me, or that she was telling me a story, but cut herself off. Something rational. But then, a picture popped up on the screen. It took me a second, due to the dark lighting of the picture, but I soon realized that it was a picture of me sleeping on the couch. From the angle, I could tell that it had been taken through the window behind our TV. My eyes darted to the window, unsure of what I'd see, but it was too dark to see much of anything. Gripping my phone tightly, I forced myself to stand up and go upstairs to our bedroom. I figured that if the person was still there, or even worse, inside the house, I could funnel them into the room and stand a better chance of defending myself, instead of waiting to be surprised from behind and reporting everything to the dispatcher. They assured me that they would send some police over to search the house and follow up with me, but they were busy, so it might be a while. Every sound I hear makes my heart skip a beat, wondering if someone's breaking in or moving around the house. I'm not sure how long I can stay like this. H is for Harry, by thefawnboy. I always wanted to work with kids. Don't ask me why. Maybe I relate to them more than I do adults, or maybe I just find their little quirks amusing. For whatever reason, I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps as an LSA. So when he got moved from the year 5 through 6 class to the reception class, it seemed like a perfect opportunity for me to get some hands-on experience. A few weeks from my first mentioning this to my dad, I was riding in the car with him to his school. I was half excited and half nervous, but not at all prepared for what I would find out over the next few days. Aware that having two Mr. Coopers in the class could get confusing, I told the kids to call me Tom. "Good morning, Tom," chorused the kids, in the classic primary school monotone that I remembered using myself some 8 years ago. Now, my dad clued me in on the way there, so I mentally picked out the kids I knew to be trouble. There was this one kid, though, who was sitting away from the group. She was perched in the reading corner, but wasn't reading. She watched the rest of the kids carefully, as though she wanted to join in. As the teacher, Mr. Crouch, set the plan for the lesson, I decided to approach her. "Hey there," I said, crouching to be at her eye level. "It's Tom. It's nice to meet you." "I'm Georgia," she replied calmly and didn't seem upset or anything. "So, what are we doing over here, huh?" She paused. "Harry wanted to read." Harry. Now that was the first time he was mentioned to me, and it would be far from the last. I laid eyes on the plush rabbit in her lap. "Is this little guy Harry?" I asked, gesturing toward it. "Nope." I waited for her to elaborate, but she didn't. So I prompted, "Is he your imaginary friend?" She sighed, long and deliberate. "No." I took the wrong signal from this. There's nothing wrong with having an imaginary friend. I used to have one myself. "He's not imaginary. You all say he is, but he's not. I know he's real. He is." She cried. Hey, I'm sorry." I spoke softly, not wanting to cause a fuss. She frowned and looked down at the plush toy. "I didn't mean to upset you." The little girl was silent, avoiding my eyes. That's when my dad came over and got my attention by tapping my shoulder. He nodded toward the door. I got to my feet, taking a final glance at the girl before following my father outside. "So, you've met Georgia, And by extension Harry too," he said quickly. "What is Harry?" "A sore topic. Her mother says she's always talked about him, since she could string a sentence together. She's convinced he's real, but of course he's not. You do just as well to accept it now," he told me, as if it were some normal thing to him. "So it's just an imaginary friend?" "Well, the weird thing is," Dad looked through the glass pane in the door, presumably to check if we were being overheard. "Apparently, the other kids are in on it too. They even leave him an extra chair in circle time." I tried to reflect my dad's amusement, but as someone who had watched his fair share of ghost adventures, and who had also heard how little kids could supposedly see ghosts, it proved difficult. My dad sensed this and shrugged. Kids, eh? You'd better get used to this sort of thing." When we went back inside the classroom, I tried not to linger on the thought. This was easier said than done, and I kept catching myself looking over at Georgia, who was always doing her own thing. Whilst the other kids were finger painting, I saw the teacher helping her with some building blocks. When he got up, I went to ask him, "How come she's not playing with the others?" Mr. Crouch gave me an odd look. "Well, she said Harry didn't want to." "And she does everything that Harry says?" "Sometimes it's easier that way. You don't want to see it when they fall out." Why was everyone acting like this was normal? This kid was psychotic. "You're sure this whole Harry thing isn't an excuse for her to get to do whatever she wants?" "I don't know, Tom. Her mother requested that we just deal with it, however that may be." He paused. "It's odd though. Her mother's such a friendly, open person, but you even mention Harry, and she goes all quiet and snappy. I know something's wrong, but it's none of my business. Realizing he probably revealed too much, he added, "And it's none of yours either, okay?" That was all anyone would tell me about the whole Harry deal. It bothered me a bit more than I'd like to admit. So the next day, I decided to spend more time with Georgia. When I arrived in the morning, I found her outside playing jump rope with some friends. I was glad to see she wasn't sitting alone. "Hey guys," I smiled. "What are you up to?"
"We're gonna beat the record for the most skips in the school,"
chimed one of them, a tiny girl with dark hair and pigtails. The two kids swinging the rope piped up to confirm. I turned to Georgia, who was clutching a notepad to mark down the numbers. "And how's that going?"
"He's doing really good.
"I think he's gonna beat the record," she chirped. Harry. Again, I looked over to where they were swinging the rope. It hadn't occurred to me that no one was jumping over it until then. I wondered why the other kids were playing along. That's when things got weird. All at once, the three kids groaned.
"How many?"
asked the dark-haired girl. The rope swingers dropped the rope and ran over to see George's tally chart.
44,
she announced, beaming with pride.
"New record!"
cried one of the rope swingers, a boy, whilst the others burst into applause. The four kids looked up at me for a reaction, but all I could do was stare in disbelief, as if I just didn't understand the exciting news. The other rope swingers said,
"Harry just beat the record for most skips ever!"
I forced a grin onto my face. "That's great. Really great." I paused. Then I couldn't resist asking, although I already knew the answer. "You can all see him?" The kids all shared glances, and then the dark-haired girl answered, "Of course. He's right there." She pointed to the thin air beside me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. What reason did these kids have to play along with Georgia's delusion, other than to keep her happy? And I knew for a fact that kids did nothing to ensure other kids' happiness. I looked down at the space Harry supposedly occupied, and felt my blood run cold. I had enough, and left them to get on with their games. In the car on the way home that evening, I relayed the story to my dad. "That's a bit odd," he said, "but nothing that's not happened before." "Are you serious?" I asked him. I was exasperated. Dad turned to me and narrowed his eyes. I knew he could see how flustered I was, so I looked away. "Since when do you believe in ghosts, Tom?" "I don't believe in ghosts. And I didn't want to either. But how else would all these kids know that he stopped skipping at the exact same time? And why else would they all act like he was right there, other than if that's what they believed?" I felt myself becoming hysterical over the situation and knew I needed to get to the bottom of it if I ever wanted to sleep again. The more I thought on it, the more real it seemed to be. I noticed the occasional toy moving, just a bit, in the corner of my eye. I saw Georgia trying to read, and the pages turning themselves. I'm still telling myself it was the wind, though no windows were open at the time. And then, a few days later, I experienced one of these falling outs. It was break time, and Georgia stayed inside to catch up on work she missed earlier. Both my dad and Mr. Crouch were outside on break duty, so I offered to watch her. Started out fine. She was working away and only occasionally asking a question about the subject. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe she was just a normal girl. Then she yelped suddenly. Then she put her hand over her mouth as if she didn't mean for it to slip out. I jumped, but she stared down at her workbook as if nothing happened. A moment passed, and she cried out again. "Stop it," she said. "Stop it, you're hurting me!" "Georgia, is everything okay?" I asked. "He pinched me," she replied, clearly in pain. "Ouch! Ouch! Harry! Stop it, please! I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. What is it? What does he want? I urged. At the time, I didn't bother telling myself it was a trick. She was jerking her head, like her hair was being pulled, and all I wanted to do was help her. Through gritted teeth, she answered, "He wants to go to the sandbox." "Then let's go." "But I don't want to. It's cold out." Another sharp tug on her hair, and she resigned. Okay. So we went out to the sandbox, and that was the end of it. Still telling myself there was a reasonable explanation, I hatched a plan. So the next day, I waited eagerly for home time. I was going to find George's mother and confront her about the whole thing. At this time, I didn't care if I had to beg. I needed to know. My dad and Mr. Crouch were taking each kid over to their parents, and I made sure to stick with Georgia. A few parents had come and gone when she pointed out the car that was pulling to the car park. "That's Mommy." "Ah, cool. Shall we go to the gate and wait there?" I offered. She jumped from the bench and took my hand, waiting patiently for me to take her across the playground. Walking with her, I noticed she was holding out the other hand, and I was about to question it when I realized why. Where Georgia went, so did Harry. "Mrs. Hogarth," I called, waving and smiling warmly at the woman. She had bags under her eyes and her hair was a mess. This didn't look like a happy woman, I thought, but Georgia seemed happy enough to see her and let go of my hand to run to greet her. I followed, suddenly feeling nervous. "I'm Tom, Mr. Cooper's son. I've been doing some work experience here," I explained. "How's my baby been?" she asked me as Georgia clung to her hip. "She's been an angel, as usual. So has Harry." I dropped the bomb and watched as the color drained from her mother's face. She took George's hand and hurried over to the car. I followed them. "Please," she said. "I don't want to cause a fuss." "Yeah, neither do I said. Now, it was true. "I just need to know." She wasn't going to tell me. I could see that from her expression. Just then, Georgia spoke up. "Harry wants you to tell him, Mommy," she said, tugging at the woman's skirt. "He trusts Tom. He wants him to know." Now, this creeped me out. Something about the fact Harry could see me, could think about me, made me really uncomfortable. I felt somehow violated. But if Georgia hadn't said it, I would have never solved the mystery. "Oh, okay then. I'd rather not just say here," her mother mumbled, opening the car door. "Would you be okay to join us? We live in the Oak, just down the street." Now, usually I wouldn't hitch rides with strangers, but this was different. I got in the passenger seat while the woman buckled her daughter into the back. Anticipation wailed in my stomach. I felt the end of the investigation drawing near, the taste of the answers on the tip of my tongue, but I wasn't sure if I would like the taste. The Hogarths lived above the Oak pub, in a snug but welcoming apartment. Despite her appearance, I suppose Georgia's mother was a good one. She motioned for me to follow her down the hall, and tried to rush past the doors of the bedrooms. But I saw what she didn't want me to see. The sign on the second door said, "Georgia and Harry." I didn't say anything. I followed the woman to the lounge. "Would you like some tea?" she asked as I took a seat. "Oh, no thanks." She sighed. I guess she was disappointed that her stalling didn't work. Silently, she sat on the armchair opposite of me. She was wringing her hands, clearly nervous. "I won't tell anyone, Mrs. Hogarth. You have my word." She sighed again, and her eyes went glassy with tears. I haven't told a soul, you know." I waited. I can't," she stuttered. I know it's ridiculous. You won't believe me. I'll believe you, I assured her, not yet sure whether that it was a lie or not. Georgia was not an only child, the woman said, voice shaking. She had a twin brother. He was stillborn. Harry. I was shocked that Georgia had been told about this, but finally understood that her imaginary games were some kind of tragic coping mechanism. This explained everything. Why the mother kept it secret? Why Mr. Crouch let everyone play along? I was finally satisfied with this. A rational answer. I'm sorry, I said, but why do you think it was a good idea to tell such a young girl about this? That's the problem, Tom. I never told her. True to my promise, I've told no one. For the rest of the month, I kept myself even and did all the things I was asked to, but could not help feeling sick whenever someone mentioned Harry. I tried to block it out when I saw the kids play with him, and when they left an empty seat. Once the work experience came to an end, I left and I never wanted to go back. I don't know what to think about the Harry ordeal. I wish I could drop the nagging thought that Harry had stayed with his sister, that the bond between the twins was so strong it was unbreakable, even by death. I didn't used to believe in ghosts. Now, I'm not so sure. Hello, monsters! I hope you guys enjoyed these stories. Big shout out to the authors out there who wrote these stories. You can find the links to these stories in the description. Also, big shout out to you monsters. Be sure to leave some comments below and hit that like button. Also, if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. Become a monster today. Have a horrific night, monsters. And until next time.